Hey Raptors, my name is Christian Johnson. I work in the Shaw Center on the Rockville campus, and that is the Student Health and Wellness Center. And I'm here doing an interview with Dr. Eric Benjamin regarding Minority Mental Health Month. And yes, so my first question for you is, can you tell us about your role and what you do, also giving a bit of your history and background?
Okay. Well, right now I'm currently the interim vice president and provost of the Rockville campus of Montgomery College. And in that role, I'm pretty much tasked with making sure that the educational program and the physical structure and layout is conducive to supporting student success and growth and health. And one of the things I love about Montgomery College, we look at the whole health of the student. So it's not just a question of getting you through your classes, but getting you through the classes and helping you all be the best you can be. 75% of you will live in the county after you finish at Montgomery College, or if you transfer and finish at college. So it's in everybody's interest that everybody is where they need to be, both academically, career-wise, and in terms of their physical, mental, and spiritual health. And I'm so fortunate that I have a job that I actually get to do that. I started at Montgomery College 25 years ago, 25 years ago this year, in counseling and advising. My doctorate is in counseling psychology from the University of Texas. So after some time in the private sector and in mental health, I came to Montgomery College in counseling advising. Then I became a professor in the psychology department in 2005, and then I became chair, and then I became dean. And last August, I became the interim vice president and provost. And I said previous to that, I grew up in Texas. I attended the University of Texas for my undergraduate and my PhD. So even though I was born in Oklahoma, I will always claim to be a Texan to the end of my heart, both good and bad. And I've been really fortunate to live in the DMV for the last 30 years. I love it up here. Father of two amazing young teenagers that I was just talking with you about before we started taping, and watching them grow and do college visits. That's my background.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Second question for you. Considering that this is Minority Mental Health Month, sorry.
Sure.
It's the third question. Here's the second question. As a psychologist, what are some of your thoughts surrounding the negative stigmas around mental health?
So much of it's come from entertainment and television and misperceptions of not just what mental health counseling or therapy is, but also I think we have some incredibly toxic notions now of what's healthy around gender, unhealthy around gender, race, socioeconomic status. I mean, I watch my daughters and it's hard to do anything about it. On their phone, looking at these images and influencers, and I'm always asking, who made this person an influencer? All they really do is sit there and stunt and floss on lives they don't exist, that they don't lead, to help to make you feel bad about yours, to buy a product. But quite frankly, that's just the nature of life in the United States and living in a commercial economy. We sell things by making people feel bad about themselves. And we get such negative issues. We have bad models of what healthy is, but then we have such misnomers about what mental health is and mental health interventions. Most of the times, if you see a movie that focuses on mental health, it's either a crazed serial killer patient or a predatorial therapist or doctor in terms of doing it. But very rarely do you get the episode about the brother who just goes to see his therapist
The reality.
just to get through life, or not to get through life, but just to deal with stuff that's going on in the world in a healthy measure. And the sensationalism around mental health treatment, especially in non-white communities, this whole notion that it was harder for our parents and they made it, so you just got to be tough to get through it. And again, especially around toxic issues of masculinity and things that we say as a father that I'm not even aware of. And I mean, I always think about, my God, I'm a 90s hip hop dude. The music I listen to and the images of hypersexuality and, you've only made it if you've got a $250,000 car,
Mm-hmm.
it sets us up for failure and unhappiness. And if the world isn't structured to support your health, you have to be very intentional about seeking out mental health opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's, religious observance, and making it an intentional priority, because the truth about it is we're intentionally being made unhealthy to sell us stuff. I mean, do you ever see like the and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, I'm saying the exact opposite, but all the commercials you see about medication for mental health, and don't get me wrong, it's absolutely warranted, and I'm not saying that it's not, but there's these notions, but that stuff isn't free. It's sold at incredible profits. So, and think it can only be prescribed if we are unhealthy. So, nobody's looking to make people better. That's
It's
shocking.
really just like a loophole to make more money.
Oh, yep. Yeah. And again, let me be clear. It absolutely is, mental health medication. I want to be clear about that. But when we live in a society that so promotes unhealth as health, we don't necessarily know, like you just said, that cycle that we're on.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're never truly like focused on is our mental health. We're more so focused on the money that we can get out of it to help businesses and not the people themselves.
That's what you see advertised.
Yeah.
I mean, but then again, a therapist or a community mental health clinic doesn't have the budget to run a commercial that says, hey, you need some help understanding some stuff going on around you. Come on, we'll get you squared away. You don't see that commercial. You don't see the commercial from colleges putting resources in, making sure that the mental health of our students and our employees is healthy. We always talk about, typically what people think about of mental health interventions are what we call tertiary. And that means after somebody comes in, says, hey, I'm struggling with something, I need some help with something. But one of the things, again, back to your first question about what I love about my job as a psychologist, I get to work with everybody around me, students included, to see how we can just maybe make this place a naturally healthy place, less anxiety provoking. There's always going to be some anxiety around college because you got to knock those grades out and transfer and do all the things that are involved in, being students. But what can we do? What can we do in the background that promotes mental health, that promotes physical health, that promotes spiritual health? And this whole notion of looking at the whole person. It's one of those things that, done well, people won't even notice. Have you ever seen just a toxic environment, a mental health environment? You notice that, but very rarely do we notice the places where we feel good, where we feel happy, where we feel mindful, where we feel involved. That's a good thing, but we also have to be intentional about creating those cultures.
Thank you. Considering that this is Minority Mental Health Month, what are your thoughts surrounding the stigma of mental health and in minority communities?
Okay, first, I'm gonna dig in behind this issue as Black men. I think I've only seen one television show, and I hate to keep going back to media and television show, that dealt from a healthy perspective of Black men's mental health issues. And son of a gun, it just went off the air this season after its 4th season, Atlanta. The show with Donald Glover and Tyree Henry, and you actually see a young brother in therapy working through his issues around masculinity, his insecurities, without being vilified for it, and his friends supporting that effort. But as Black men, we are so hyper-defined around us, even amongst ourselves. I mean, you gotta be that guy. You've got to always be, you can't be soft for a lot. You can't have a bad day, everybody's watching you, you feel the collective burden of even folks you don't know. I mean, have you ever watched the news and seen a brother do something stupid on the news and you go, that ain't helping, brother, but we also think, you know, and from my perspective, my mother's a clinical psychologist, and you always think my parents had it harder than I did. I mean, they grew up in the South in the 40s and 50s, and you think that's got to be hard. So I just got to be tougher and just can't let anybody know, because the moment I let somebody know, I'm not either living up to that stereotype, or I'm going to be victimized, or I'm going to be made fun of, or I'm going to be clowned. We struggle with mental health issues also, and the ability to reach out and tell a friend, tell a colleague, you know, I'm anxious about something, I'm worried about something, this is going on. And so many but just taking this outside of the scope of Black men, we also live in a world where culturally we think that mental health is something that you happen on. And the whole notion of you're going to spend what money to go talk to somebody about your problems. And so many of it, one of the things I love about Montgomery College is we are the most diverse institution, a two-year college in the lower 48 states, and we have students from over 160 different countries on our campuses at any given time. That a lot of our cultures for a lot of our students are based on honoring our families and talking about your family outside of your family to other people who may not understand your culture, may be seen as disloyal, it may be seen as unsupportive, or admitting that. But the truth is, I mean, we're more alike than we are different. And, you know, as not even just as a therapist, I feel comfortable saying, you know, I have been in therapy, and it has helped me be a better father, a better partner, a better colleague at times to do it. You know, and I say, well, you're a psychologist. Yeah, but it helps. But still, at the same time, you know, I have really close relatives who I would not talk about my experience in therapy. Well, excuse me, take it back. That I feel uncomfortable broaching the subject. But I know that the times in my family where I have talked about mental health, it is, once the conversation started, everybody's happier. The conversation. I know I was talking to one of my cousins. I was saying, no, you know, my therapist says like, "You're in therapy, dude. You seem pretty happy all the time."
I think it's harder to start the conversation rather than continue it.
But isn't that the same thing about most difficult, awkward conversations? It's not the conversation, it's just the part that's getting it. But one of the things I'm also very fortunate is my church has a very active, professionally, clinically trained mental health ministry. These people, these men and women are psychologists, they're counselors, they're clinical social workers, they're psychiatrists. Because, you know, like I said, you know, like I tell people, I'm just a, you know, Baptist brother from Houston, Texas. But the truth is, I apologize if this is going to offend some people. Not everything can be prayed away. You know, I'm going, you know, maybe my prayer is good mental health, you know, intervention, and, you know, time and the ability to see a therapist. But that's one of the things also people don't want to talk about. A lot of these mental health interventions are not free. And so you say, what's the stigma in a family with, you know, only so much money, finite resources, insurance, or heaven forbid, immigration status isn't documented. You know, nobody really wants to go on the record, but it is so necessary. And I did bring up organized religion because, you know, Baptists, they say, you know, take your problems to God. Well, I took my problems to God, and God told me, you need some therapy. And, you know, but it's just, everybody needs help, you know. So.
What is the intersection between mental wellness and physical health in minority communities?
Oh my gosh, they're in between any community, they're inseparable. And that's the, you know, it's funny. I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and I've come to the realization, you know, I'm, you know, physically healthy, and I think I'm mentally and spiritually healthy, but my diet is horrible, man. And I'm sitting here thinking, you know, you know, then I don't want to, you know, sound because like a nutritionist out this, but I I need to, cut back on some of this sugar and carbs, and it's not for weight, it's just for managing my mood. And it's when I did my doctoral internship over at the University of Maryland. It was so that's what brought me to the area. I came from Austin, Texas to do my internship, and I fell in love with the DMV. But I remember one of the psychologists, Dr. Akira Otani, was supervising me, and we were talking about, ways, because mental health issues are so prevalent in college students. It's just the anxiety that you all exist in, because for many of you who are in your 20s, your life is in transition right now. Your education's changing, your relationships are changing, your family's changing, or your family is changing around the whole thing. So what he told me is, when you're looking at somebody with mild to moderate depression, which is one of the most common diagnoses that you will see, and even undiagnosed diagnoses that you'll see, I always work with my clients before we start talking about what's going on for them and looking at strategies and looking at how past issues are playing out in their current issues. I ask them, are you getting any exercise? How is your sleep? I don't know about you, but when I'm stressed out, my stress shows up stomach issues and sleep. And then I start eating. It makes me stop eating. Some people eat a lot. I'm one of those people who stop eating, which makes my stomach issues worse, which makes my stress issues worse. But what I've learned is be intentional. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s right now, and here's a psychological existential issue. I'm starting to see some of my friends die now because of unhealthy, toxic lifestyles, the food they eat, the stress they keep themselves under, and so much of the medication that they're taking to function are ways to keep going without addressing the medications that they're on, without addressing the underlying issues. It's kind of like an athlete who takes medication to play hurt. Nah, brother, you need to take some time out, and you need to heal up, and you need to get yourself better, then re-engage the game. But your mental, your physical, and spiritual, I don't even, and it's interesting, we talk about them as intersectionality. I think they're all the same thing, and it's this whole thing about being a whole person. So I tell people, and my daughters might say, Dad, you need to listen closely to what you're saying, is I'm always intentional about career, always intentional about showing up for other people. But yet, if I don't have time, I'll swing by and grab some fast food while I'm getting one. No, take some time, eat a green vegetable, eat some fruit, or heaven forbid, just do nothing one day and unwind. And especially, again, in so many minority communities, we feel that self-care is indulgent. It's necessary to who we are. We will be better to ourselves and those around us if we realize our diet, our system of belief, our physical health, our mental health, it's all the same thing.
As a provost of our community college, how do you perceive the impact of mental health on student success and academic achievement?
I've seen some students who got really great grades struggle with their mental health while doing it. And the thing that breaks my heart many times, it's about the grade.
I feel like one trumps the other sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe I can say, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's easy for me to say is I got my PhD, I got my bachelor's degree, but it really is true. And I so stress this with my daughters. As you can tell, I'm a doting father, so I keep going back to my two teenage daughters, Mars and Olivia. But I always tell them, don't worry about the grades. Grades are something that other people are levers other people have to prove. Did you study? Did you prepare? Did you do your best? Then I'm good. Then we're happy. And this pressure, isn't coming from me. My wife is very successful in her career, and we talk about, we don't need you to be us. Do you? Be happy with the skin. Be happy with the skin that you are in around this. And I did most of my clinical training actually at college mental health centers, at the counseling center at the University of Maryland, at the counseling center at the University of Texas. Tends to select for students with incredibly high senses of achievement and struggling with not living up to. And there's so much that I'm really interested on how we can work proactively as an institution to not just provide mental health services, but places where it doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be like that. You know, it's always found that the students that I've had when I was a professor, and it seems just like yesterday, I love being a professor, and I still identify myself as a professor. I haven't been in the classroom in probably about 5 or 6 years. Maybe I'll see if I can teach a class next year. But it's the students that you just reach out and talk to, even on a Zoom class, a couple of minutes before a class. How are you doing? You find out a little something about them. You know, it's interesting. You know, I was laughing. My students like, "You like hip hop?" I love hip hop. It's kind of what I grew up on, is hip hop. And you just have that discussion, and you realize so many of us struggle with the same things. We, you know, pleasing our families, the people around us. These grades really do mean something. When I have a student in the classroom who checks out of class, it may not be because they don't like the subject matter. It may be they got a whole lot of stuff going on around them that kept them from getting to class, that they're tired or stressed out and they can't focus on the information here. Heck, it's what I love the work that the Shaw Center does. Maybe they're just hungry. Maybe their housing situation is unstable. So we work, and it's what I love about this college is our leadership doesn't just talk about the mental health of our students and faculty and staff and administrators. Dr. Williams expects us to deliver on this. You know, you always hear the courageous conversation, the courageous act. But even just as I said it, acting to structure a culture that is about healthiness shouldn't be a subversive act. You know, I always talk with my student worker and my staff around me. You're not going to get a whole bunch of emails from me after 5 o'clock and on weekends. I need my family to balance. You know, I was talking about my daughters have me running all over the world, but I need that to be healthy and I need that to be grounded. You know, what I always worry about for students is, you know, it's one of the things about COVID, now that everything became remote, when you juxtapose that with social media, you all are always on now. You're never off. I graduated. You're like, wow, I didn't know they had high schools. I graduated high school in 1984. The funny thing about leaving, you know, and I graduated undergrad in 88, even in 1988, when you were done for the day, you were done. My daughter says, nah, now they have on Instagram. Now, you know, your whole self is about getting somebody to hit a thumbs up and give you a like. That's crazy. These people don't know you. That's not even their best life. They're fronting too, you know. But the point about it is so important as a provost is, you know, it's an interesting title. It's vice president / provost. The vice president is of academic affairs. How can we, you know, make classes that are more healthy to students, structure classes that are more healthy to students? And then as a provost, it's sort of managing the whole environment of the campus. You know, how do I work with my other fellow provosts, Dr. Kanamui at Germantown, Dr. Stewart at Tacoma Park, to make sure, you know, that students' lives are manageable. And it's one of the, and I apologize if I'm talking too much, but you can tell I think a lot about this stuff. When did you start Montgomery College?
I started fall semester of 22.
So you started in COVID. Well, no, you started right after the end as
right
we were
after.
coming out of it. But one of the interesting things that we did that I think was helpful, but it created a new mental health challenge for students and faculty. We used to have classes only in 2 formats, in person or online, distance learning. But then we started offering the live streaming classes. But think about this. You all now have to structure your lives around 3 different ways of instruction. When I did it, it was easy. Just show up in class, take notes, take a test, write a paper, do a project, you're out. but it's a completely different learning style, face to face, as opposed to live streaming, as opposed to what we call asynchronous online, when you have to do things at a particular time and date. And your lives are becoming more fragmented. In my, now I do sound like the old dude. Like I said, in my day, it was over when it was over. But now, work and everything, we used to talk about work-life balance, but you all blended together, and I'm not saying that that's unhealthy, but you have to find a healthy way to do it. I can't find a healthy way to do it, so I do it the way that I know how to do it. When 5 o'clock comes, I'll make sure my boss is listening, 5 o'clock, so maybe closer to 4:45 today, because I have to get my daughter from tutoring. But I also love to work. I love that I work at a place that nobody's gonna get mad at me if I leave work 15 minutes early to take care of my family, because that's important to me. So again, structuring, what I love about my job is I get to work with everybody on this campus. You all, the students, faculty, the staff, the sister that makes the mozzarella sticks for me in the cafeteria.
All over.
Yeah, and we all are, working to make this place a healthy place for everybody. And that we are the community's college. I moved here for a reason, because I remember people like, young brother with a PhD, you need to get to the DMV. You're gonna love it here. And I do, and I've started my family here. And the role of a community, we are the community's college, and the ability to be impactful outside of the boundaries of this campus and college. I mean, I'm serious. I feel truly blessed to have this opportunity. It's fortunate.
How common is it for minorities to experience mental health challenges, and not just minorities, but everyone as a whole? And have you yourself experienced any issues with your mental health?
Sure. I mean, and I'll deal with the latter, with the issues around my mental health later. But it was interesting. I was talking to a group of MCPS teachers around the lack of Black and Latino teachers in Montgomery County public schools. But I think it applies to most minority groups. And like, wow, I get this. To say minority mental health matters is not saying that white mental health doesn't matter. Nobody's saying that. But what I am saying, and it was interesting because I was talking to these teachers, they were talking about issues around burnout as teachers. And one of the things they talked about was we pay what's called the invisible tax. And it's about being responsible for everybody like you. And what it means is that people gotta be real. Sexism costs your mental health. Sexism is stressful. Racism is stressful. Homophobia is stressful. The one thing they never talk about in Montgomery County? Elitism. The privilege of being, regardless of wealth, I keep saying wealth, regardless of gender or race or sex or nationality, this urge that everybody has to live in one of these $1.5 million homes and live in this part of the county and be a member of this society or that society. This place is an incredibly competitive county. And we compete with each other. And especially as people of color or marginalized communities, that comes as stress. The stress of being followed around, it just happened to me recently. The stress of being followed around a store in a shopping mall with nobody asking if they could help me, but you're watching me. The stress as a father of watching my daughters deal with issues of sex and race, and they just want to live their life and be, that stuff is hard. That stuff costs you. That stuff has the effects. Living in a world that expects less of you, or if you're not into what the people think you stereotypically should be into, there's really no way to affirm your identity. Think about it. There's a million ways that we see that you can get thumbs up if you're into entertainment or you're into sports. But how many times somebody just pats you on the back and says, "Hey, Kristen, man, I appreciate the work you're doing around your degree." You never get those props. And so that, it's interesting. W.B. Du Bois wrote in his book, The Souls of Black Folk, when he talked about the duality of being African and American. And he talked about this dogged determination that allows us to hold those roles together. And what he was talking about, my gosh, 120 years ago was intersectionality, just like that question. Son of a gun, that takes energy. That's stressful to people. So around my mental health, as a therapist in training, you're expected to to be in therapy just so you understand your issues and they're not taken out on your clients, called counter transference. But I mean, as I've grown and gone through life, I've sought out mental health. I've seen therapists before in my life, and maybe I will again. I don't. It was incredibly valuable. Admittedly, some of it was more valuable than others, but the acknowledgement that I needed to work with someone or a group or some health around it has been incredibly valuable. I think about it, again, I talk a lot about my role as a father or my role as a husband or my role as a partner. You want to think you just know this stuff. As a dad of two teenage daughters, I thought my parents knew everything. Now, as the parent, I realized they were just making it up as they go along. They stayed awake at nights too, stressing about, are we okay? I mean, my gosh, I worry about the father of Black children. What happens when they get pulled over? Or what happens if they just I'm from the South. What happens when you just get caught in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, dropping a friend off, and you got a pack of people now surrounding you, or, what happens if my daughters just want to go to a party, and everybody gives your children the same rules about it? Takes a lot out of you. People don't realize to teach your kids how to be safe around the police. How about you teach the police how to be safe around my kids? So you can see, these things, and I was one of my favorite books by James Clavell, Shogun, they refer to as the death of 1,000 cuts. That stuff adds up on you. So you've got to find a way to establish, like you said a moment ago, intersectional health, mental, physical, spiritual, heck, financial. But again, they all go together. People, I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot easier to be happy if your bills got paid last month. Don't kid yourself. So, and it all goes together. I thank God I have a job that I get up in the morning, that I love getting to campus in the morning. But I also love leaving campus to be with my friends and family also. And it's just trying to understand what that balance is in life. But like I said, for your generation, it's blend. Cool, I got that.
Given the absence of mental health services on campus, what initiatives or strategies can be implemented to support mental health well-being of students at MC? For example, like at the Shaw Center, we have peer advocates and counseling. We have personal meetings and stuff. But
Sure.
Though it may not be enough to.
Right, and in terms of, we don't offer at this college long-term clinical intervention. Howard Community College up the street does. I said University of Maryland offers it, and people forget, in terms of undergraduate enrollment, we're about the size of the University of Maryland. We definitely have more students with 0 to 60 credits than they do. We are a medium to large institution. I would admittedly, as an administrator, as a relatively high-ranking administrator, I would love to see therapeutic clinical counseling services, and we talk about and try to figure out ways to possibly move toward that model. I trained in college counseling centers, and it wasn't just, people think it's just students. No, faculty and staff also use these resources. Quoting John Legend, we're all just ordinary people. And I do think we can do more work with bringing it on campus, because this is where students spend a great deal of their day. Especially, I think there's opportunity around telehealth and video counseling right now. 20, 30 years ago, I said, don't believe that. But we've seen that it can work. If I can't get to my therapist's office or my social worker's office, I can Zoom you for 50 minutes in terms of doing it, So I think there's tremendous opportunity there. But I do think what we can do, I would love to increase our relationships with mental health services that are provided in the county. The taxpayer dollars are already paying for it to connect our students to be more intentional about connecting our students with diverse networks of mental health professionals, either individual or through agencies or through our faith-based partners in the county. We have a strong faith-based population in this county, and working through these institutions to provide these mental health services. We can do more, and we are trying to do more, but as you can tell, I'm a little bit impatient with what more is. I'm a psychologist. We can do it, we have licensed trained mental health professionals who teach classes for us.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have your students in therapy as patients. It's called a dual relationship, so you can't. But how do we foster those services on campus? But as I said a moment ago, how do we also deconstruct things that contribute to unhealthy behaviors or unhealthy cultures, which we do not even. I love Montgomery College. I love working here. I've done it for 25 years. But there's things, quite frankly, that could undermine people's health. And we have to get up every day and work diligently and be honest to deconstruct those. I mean, these classes and textbooks are not cheap. $300 for a textbook. That's about 2 sessions of therapy right there with the deductible. You shouldn't have to trade this money for that service. You shouldn't have to trade it for food. You shouldn't have to trade it for health care. Like you said, I keep going back to my love of 90s hip hop. One of my favorite groups from the 90s is Tribe Called Quest, right? And there's this line in one of the songs, riding on the train with no dough sucks. And that's the point. Poverty is stressful and students struggle, and people don't want to admit in a county as affluent as Montgomery County. People talk about, and it's so back to hip hop, so many rappers always, male and female, always release this song about how hard it is to be rich. More money, more problems, Yeah, it's better than not having the money. Let's write that song, But which puts us right back on that cycle. So, the more and more I talk to you about it, the more and more I'm really conscious of, you've got to be intentional about jumping off that cycle and creating an environment that promotes mental health and awareness, and it's okay to get help. It's okay to get help and structure classes where students don't have to run 45 minutes off campus and then try to get back to class. It's one of the things I love about the Shaw Center. Food. I mean, it's hard to focus in class if your tummy's rumbling, or you're just eating junk food because that's all the time that you have to get. And again, I go back to, without, going too deeply into the brother's business, it's one of the things I so deeply admire about our current president. He's very intentional about mindfulness and his health and the health of his family. And these are the models that we should be projecting to our students. It's not just the content in the classroom. We're a community. We can work together as a community. The greatest experiential learning opportunity is the health of your community, and that's so very important.
Very strong points. I just wanted to thank you for your time and for the interview.